What's up, T-Tam fam? Good morning, Eric here for Sunday, February 22nd. Welcome for another episode 33 of The Truth About Me. I'm excited about this episode, honestly. This is something that is an ongoing process, and I'm really enjoying it. It's about leadership and leading yourself first. Before before I get into it, and one thing I want you to kind of take away from this is that you won't be disappointed if you lead yourself, right? So kind of keep that in mind as this episode unfolds. But um, yeah, let's get into it. So for a long time, I wanted clarity from other people. Now I realize clarity starts with leading yourself. Before I would need the, excuse me, I would want the explanation, for me to be able to move on. And, because that gave me that closure, that gave me that reason. And as I've come to find out through my journey here, is that I have to create my own clarity. Um, because, you have people that are going to give you that, but most won't. Why? Because they're running from something, or they're scared, or they're just done with you, right? And you have to be able to create that clarity for yourself. So episode 33 is about what happens when you stop waiting to be led, and start leading your own life. And this is something, as a kind of segue into it, has brought me to self-leadership and what I've been getting out of it, throughout this time. And honestly, it's something of an amazement, because here we are, we're so in most situations, and, I'll kind of speak for myself, is, yeah, I was leading myself 100%, but was it down the right path? Or be like, oh, I need this person to do this, or I need that person to do that. There was a lot of dependence there. And, throughout, as I've gotten older, and then most recently, is at the end of the day, the only person that you can really trust is yourself. So, let's talk about what self-leadership actually is. So self-leadership means making decisions without external validation. Whatever you decide is what you decide. You don't need to ask family members, friends. You're an adult. Whatever you choose, you better go with it. Setting standards without apology. Why? That's along with leadership, it's more of a self-respect thing. Is making sure that, people are aligning with you and you're aligning with them, not you're shrinking to be with them, or they're shrinking to be with you. You don't want that. Commitments that you set for yourself, right? You have to honor those. And that's why, setting those small goals, is important, whether it's a daily goal, weekly goal, monthly goal, quarterly, biannually, or annually. You have to honor those. So if you write it down, you best check it off within a timely manner, because you owe that to yourself. When it comes to your emotions, it's how do you regulate, instead of reacting. And that's something I've always kind of been, keen on, and especially in this last situation, I was very, very regulatory with, my emotions, because of what, there's really no reason to react to it. Because people, I hate to say it, but people are entitled to their own opinions and their own ways of doing things, and then they're not always going to agree with you. So what's the point in getting mad or pissed off, right, or upset? Hey, that's their choice. They're an adult. They made that decision. So you have to be able to regulate yourself and how you handle situations accordingly. So here's another thing. This is you know, this one's a little bit tough for me simply because I live day to day, but I'm learning to look at more long-term outcomes. Is choosing those long-term outcomes over short-term relief, and that to me is that's tough because, like I said, being an alcoholic, kind of living day by day, one day at a time. My long-term goals are very few, and it's a very short list, you know. And so, but it's at the end of the day, it's goal setting for me. It's what I want to achieve, and I'll get there. It's just gonna take me time, but I know those things will come to fruition. So one thing I want you to kind of understand about this is if you can't lead yourself, you'll constantly look for someone else to do it for you. And that's where dependency comes in. And in this day and age, is you cannot be dependent on anyone because that's in some way, shape, or form they will fuck you over, guaranteed. And that's why you have to create your own path or blaze your own path if you want to get fancy. But keep that in mind. Is that you do what's right for you. Excuse me. You make decisions. You go. You say, hey, I want to be at X amount of dollars in the bank by X date. All right, make it happen. Or I want to lose, 20 pounds by X date. Make it happen. Everything's attainable. But again, it's honoring those commitments to yourself and the promises that you made, because realistically, that's what matters. And so now, with that being said, I look at of where I wasn't leading myself, because for me to lead myself, I had to obviously go through some turbulence and trials and tribulations and all of that. So, like, you have to be honest. You have to be honest with yourself. Is what are things that I can do to improve what I'm doing. One was over explaining myself repeatedly because I needed to get that answer. I wanted them to see my side, and no matter what I did, it wasn't happening. Again, that's their choice, that's their decision. So overthinking decisions, constantly replaying things and going back and forth and not saying, hey, listen, you know what, like, this is what I did. Like, I would take accountability 100%. Like, that's one thing I can say with honesty and truth, is that whatever I've done, I've always held myself accountable. But it's thinking about those decisions that I made and why I did it. And that's kind of where it starts, is doing that inner work. Reacting emotionally. Again, that's something where being a Cancer, astrological sign, mind you, is I have high emotion. Like, I feel everything. So with me, especially when it comes to relationships, is feeling. Oh, sorry, I didn't sleep well last night, but is feeling everything emotionally, and it's tough because when something kind of triggers that or hits that, like, I just want to go. But I've learned that, hey, I gotta stop, I gotta think about it and kind of go over before I give the reasoning or answer or whatever the situation calls for. I would negotiate boundaries in the sense of it, seeing what could be done and what couldn't be, and that's a no-no, especially when it comes to yourself. Is I've never really had boundaries, so there really wasn't much negotiating in there. But when I've set those, is now like that's kind of law. This is Eric's law. Like this is what I'm going to tolerate. This is what I'm not going to tolerate. So, kind of, you know, be mindful of that. At one point during relationships, it was about reassurance because, so many times I've been in relationships and the communication has been poor. So I would, ask questions and constantly ask questions till I got an answer. And to be truthfully honest, like, it shouldn't be that hard to get an answer out of somebody. I mean, just common decency. But some people like to make it difficult, and that is, it's more of a them problem than me problem. But again, it was, me looking for that because they didn't answer or I didn't like the answer that was given to me rather than accepting that answer. And then how, relationships were defined, whether it's by me or whether it's by, my significant other at the time, who defined the relationship. And that's one thing that it was, like, I still look at it as a 50-50. However, you know, now that's kind of changed simply because, um, of everything that I've gone through. So yeah, waiting for either me or waiting for somebody else to define it isn't there. It's going to be defined, once we become a partnership. You know what I mean? Once it's said, hey, you're my girlfriend and I'm your boyfriend. Like that's where it's defined. And you know, and they're just gonna have to deal with that. Beforehand, it was just kind of like, just fly by the seat of my pants. And how's that worked out for me so far? Not good. So, and if you can't laugh at yourself, then, you know, whatever. But, this is why we're in this life is, we're not supposed to be perfect, right? And we are going to make mistakes constantly. It's being able to learn and grow from those, mistakes that you encounter. Here's an interesting one that I saw is when you don't lead yourself, you drift. What happens when you drift? You ever drifted a car? You know, I know you guys have seen the movie Fast and the Furious, but when you're talking about drifting, it's a controlled movement, right? But in relationships or personal life, even professional, you have the ability to lose control, and that's not what you want. Because you always want to have that control over, where you stand in that relationship. I'm not talking about not control in the sense of you're controlling, like I say you do type of thing. No, I'm not. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like the relationship as a whole, making sure that you're leading it correctly, so it's following the path of both of you guys who stay in that alignment. You know, so we kind of get into how I changed, or what changed, I should say. And the things that I'm looking at now is, instead of over explaining, comes fewer words, right? Fewer words impact more. Having negotiating boundaries now turns into clearer boundaries, making sure that they're up front. Hey, listen, this is X, Y, and Z. Are you in? Or are you out? Um, and it's going to save a whole hell of a lot of time. The thing is, urgency. There's less urgency. I am in no rush to, move into something new at all. And if it happens, it happens. But, right now I'm just kind of focused on myself and focused on my professional career. So that's what I'm going for. If something happens to come across, then hey, we're going to explore it. But I'm in no rush. So again, slower decisions. Again, this is regulating your emotions. This is turning from reactivity back into, okay, let's find out what was just said. Let's process it. How can we respond to that calmly? That is, making sure my routines are strong. Again, I have my day to day, between work and gym, and then when I have time with my daughter, she comes she comes into play. Then she takes precedence. So for me, that's never really gonna change um, about that, and also is being present, you know, showing that presence. Um, the one thing is leadership isn't loud; it's consistent, and I've voiced consistency throughout my journey here. And that's something I truly, 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 truly believe in. Is that in the beginning it's difficult to start anything or to do anything. But I'm telling you, once you quote unquote rip the band-aid off and start doing what it is that you want to do consistently, you will reap the benefits of that. I guarantee you. It's not going to be instant. However, trust the process. All right. You have to believe in yourself 100%. So now I'm going to kind of, segue more into leading myself in real life, right? You got to make it practical, you know. What does that look like? And I kind of hit some things before, but let's add a few more. If you say you're going to wake up at 5 a.m., you wake up at 5 a.m. Again, not getting triggered, staying calm. Like that's one of those things where we pull back if something happens. It's not about reactivity, it's about regulating and staying calm and finding a response if it's applicable. Not reaching out impulsively, just because, you're feeling a certain way. Again, those are all kind of red flags, because you're not thinking clearly. So, again, you're taking that urgency and pulling it back and not reaching out to that person impulsively, because you're just going to do more damage to yourself. This is kind of a big one, is protecting my time. That's one thing that I absolutely do not like is my time wasted. And my time is very valuable because at the end of the day, that's all that we have in this world is time. And I do not like it to be wasted. If I feel it's going to be wasted or not used effectively, I won't do it. It's that simple. I will cut and run. I will cut and move on. It's that simple. Here's another big one is keeping your word. I've always been a man of my word, whether it's through good or bad. I believe in the days of, a man's word is his bond. Same thing with a handshake. I'm very old school like that. Because again, keeping your word is the truth that you're speaking to that person and to yourself. And by doing that, you're showing that you are trustworthy. Um, and that's huge. That's very big to me. Um, Prioritizing fatherhood. Just making sure that I'm doing right by my daughter, and making sure that she has everything, making sure that I'm there for her when she needs it, and letting her know that, because kids these days are different, and I will say she's smarter than most, but still, at the end of the day, she needs me, and I'm always going to be there for her. And then, to kind of end this it's protecting my physical and mental health. Anytime you go through any sort of traumatic situation, breakup or whatnot, like your nervous system is shot, and it takes time for it to kind of rebuild. And that's the perfect opportunity to have something as an outlet. Now, physical, whether you go have some barbell therapy, or you like to go for a run, or you want to sit in hot yoga, or you want to go rollerblading, whatever it is that you do, line dancing, something that you enjoy, that allows you to be you for that time period. right? And that's really what it is. And making sure that if you have any mental health stuff, that you are seeking treatment or you are doing stuff to improve your quality of life, because that shit will weigh you down. You cannot have that. And it was evident in this last relationship that I had, that mental health was, it was there and I could deal with it. The problem is I didn't know the extent. I didn't know the full extent. And, after kind of replaying everything, it goes deep. It went really deep. And unfortunately, it was something that was not fully explained to me. And so, with that is, if you have stuff like that, you have to get help, because that shit will eat you alive. 100% will eat you alive. So, here's a small thing about self-leadership, is that it's built in small decisions. Now, I've said kind of since the beginning of keeping your goals small and attainable. Well, same thing when it comes to your decisions. They don't have to be grand decisions, they just be small decisions, Keep that, because you know, small eventually adds up over a period of time. And if you're able to set yourself up, think of it like this, right? If you set yourself up a goal, one goal per day, an attainable goal per day, and you do that every day, you just set 365, and you do that for a period of 1 year. That's 365 goals you accomplished. When was the last time you accomplished 365 goals? When was the last time you accomplished 200 goals? Or 100 goals? Or 50 goals? Or 10? Or even 5? So again, you start small, you're able to build, and that's what ultimately leads to your success, because you're staying consistent. And consistency is key, and I can't stress that enough. You will hear me say it over and over and over again. So let's talk about emotional leadership, right? Emotional leadership, it's a painful process, because you are, first and foremost, sitting with discomfort. Stuff that pains you mentally, when the breakup occurs, or something that's going on. It's being able to identify what bothers you, being okay, accepting that, and being okay, but also finding a resolution for it, right? If you don't, and you try to push it down and forget about it, again, that shit will just eat you alive and will come out at the least time that you expect it. And that's not what you want. You want to be able to resolve whatever it is, whatever discomfort you're having, and get it out of you, so you can be able to move on properly. Again, it's not chasing reassurance. It's not escalating conflict. It's not reacting from ego. It's not letting emotion dictate dictate identity, right? So those last three kind of all fall in with, taking the urgency out of it, staying calm, thinking about, instead of reacting to what the situation is taking it all in and kind of being like, okay, what can we do? Talk it out and respond in kind, Because the one thing I don't do is I don't suppress emotions anymore. I manage them. And whether I write it down, whether I talk to somebody, whether I work it out, like that's really what it is. It's not about keeping it inside anymore. It's about getting it out, getting it off of your shoulders, right? That's where you want to get those, emotions off, because they will weigh you down. And that's maturity. Think about that. So why does self-leadership, why it changes relationships? So this is kind of like a ripple effect. When you lead yourself, you don't tolerate chaos. You don't beg for clarity. You don't chase potential. That's That's a big one. You don't stay when you're not aligned. But here's the funny thing, is you attract different people. Why? Because your mindset is different. And that's what you kind of have to understand throughout this, is that there are people that love to live in chaos. That's where their home is. You know, they're hooked on reality TV shows. They love the drama. They love it all, and they think that's real life, and that's not. It really isn't. But that's why it's important. Kind of going back to, you don't chase potential, and actions from somebody mean a lot more than words, and I believe that very statement as well, and I live by that statement. If I say something, I'm going to do it. I'm going to follow through with it. I'm going to show you that, hey, this is what I'm doing, and this is how it's all going to go. But there are those that are physically attracted to somebody, and sometimes partners, all they can offer is physical stuff. Why? Because that's all that they know. That's all that they're good at, because they suck at everything else, right? And you have to be able to see through that. Yeah, I mean, having a great physical partner is absolutely the best. You know what I mean? But let's look beyond that. What can they offer you beyond that? Are they holding true, or is it just about the physical aspect? So, or are they saying all of these things, but yet when it comes to actually putting them into play, are they doing it? And that's really where you have to differentiate between that and identify that early on, because some people are great at hiding them, but eventually, it's going to come down, and this isn't a game. Again, this is like, going back to, your first kind of encounters with your partner, and what you're looking for. You know what I mean? Having these conversations early and often, because here's the thing, is if you don't have the conversations and all of a sudden time goes by, now you're more invested, both primarily mentally, because you are trying to, be with this person. But again, you want to get the answers that you're looking for early. So in the event that it doesn't align with you, you can say, hey, you know what? This just isn't going to work for me. I'm sorry. It's not, you're not aligning with what I'm looking for. And it's okay to say that. Like, that's what you have to understand, that it's okay. Not everybody can be a yes man, right? Because you're just going to be a welcome mat. And who wants to be a welcome mat? Who wants to get dirt kicked all over them? Mud, water, snow, you name it, ice. You don't want that. You don't want that at all. Excuse me. Ooh. So the way you lead yourself teaches people how to treat you, right? And this is kind of, when it comes to that, in both sides actually, and because you're learning about that person on what the kind of do's and don'ts are, and they will respect you more, and you will respect them more if they are asking these questions, and trying to find out about everything, so they know that they know what to do. Or they may come to you and say, hey, listen, you know what, this I can't be what you're asking, because it's not aligning with me. And that's okay. You have to be, this isn't just this is two people here, right? So when you're talking about that, and whether it's personally or professionally, like, these are the things that you have to kind of look out for, because this applies in both aspects. All right. So how I'm going to kind of close this out is, I'm not waiting for someone to complete my direction anymore. I know where I'm going. and I'm really, really excited for my journey. I'm going to end with this. If you want a different life, start by leading yourself. Guys, I appreciate you taking the time, you know, on this Sunday morning. We're a little after 7:30 right now. Um, to check this out. This is a really, this is a really good episode, um, because it reinvigorates me. It makes me see myself differently. That I'm making positive changes for myself in my life. And that right there is, I don't need anybody else to do that for me, because I'm blazing the trail for myself. And that's the only thing you can do. So, today, today we got, we got, my niece's first birthday party coming up. So I'm excited about that. It's going to be fun. Some cake smashing potentially. Um, so, but with that, make sure you hit the gym. I got the gym coming up in a couple of hours. Not a couple of hours now. We got an hour and a half. So, time to get ready for that. But with that, get after it today. Again, whether you're going to the gym, whether you're going to church, whether you're going to go meet up with somebody, meet up with friends, family, have a day. You deserve it. Again, I appreciate you guys, checking in and watching my stuff, and I hope this episode means a lot to you and something you were able to pull from that, because it meant a lot to me. Till then, enjoy your Sunday. See you next week.